Welcome to our listening audience and a big welcome to our discussion panel this afternoon here in Sydney, following on from the business show, which took place in November here in Sydney as well, where we ran a series of discussion panels. And this second topic that we addressed during that particular business show is what are the implications of implementing generative AI on the social system of organizations. It's a big topic, and to help us wrestle with that topic, I would like to introduce you all to Natalia Salzberg from Headway Group. G'day, Natalia. To Mike Kirch from Fixture Digital here in Sydney as well. G'day, Mike. Hello. And of course to Radan Kuzarek from ACMP ANZ. How are you, my friend?
I'm well, thank you. Good afternoon. Hi, everyone.
Fantastic. So I'm just going to get our screen sharing happening for us. Just to clarify again, the topic of our discussion panel this afternoon is what are the implications of implementing Gen AI in respect of the social system of organizations. Every organization is a socio-technical system. It brings human beings together for a purpose, and it brings technologies, it brings assets, resources. It brings the non-human world into contact with the human world to deliver something of value to a marketplace, to a community, etc. Okay, so to a country, and so on. And so today, that's the topic we're going to address, and we're going to set this up as some brief, sort of challenging thoughts and ideas from each of our presenters here, including myself. I'll get us underway in just a moment, and then I'm going to hand over to Natalia. She's going to share some of her thoughts about this topic, then Radan, and then finally Mike. And once we've done this sort of 7 to 10 minutes presenting a few thoughts and ideas, we'll come together then as a final group, as a discussion panel. We'll see how it goes, 10 to 20 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is, and we're going to dig a little deeper into those thoughts that we've shared, have a bit of a chat about what that might mean and our own respective experiences working in enterprises, not only in this country, but around the world as well. Okay, so that's the approach today. So let me get this underway. My view is going to be covered by just two compelling substantive thoughts. And it's this notion of connection and relation between human, let's call us the organic aspect of this world, this new world we're encountering, this complexity that now is bringing both generative AI and agentic AI into our workplaces, and the inorganic or the non-human systems. What's the possibility? Is it possible for us to coexist? Is it possible for us to actually integrate our collective efforts? Or will we stand separate from one another going forward? These are really important organizational design and organizational sustainability type questions. These are systemic questions. We're introducing into the system of an organization, not just algorithmic programming, the stuff that we used to do last century, I can use that expression, but what we've become well known for this century, the early parts of the 2000s, but in the last 5 years or so, certainly generative AI, and well known for the skills that we acquired in prompt engineering and based on large language models, moving rapidly towards other models, world models and so forth, where fundamentally we are starting to head toward independent decision-making, predictability and so forth, predicting what our wants and needs and responses might be, and then of course not only anticipating them, but then responding to that and to that interpretation of our needs with agentic AI. So that's where we're going right now. So what is the possibility? Okay, so let me have a look at this with you. I want to share with you a body of work, a good friend, teacher, and mentor. I've been working with Jim for 20 odd years, a remarkable human being, and this is his latest book, You and We, built out of the work of originally a very significant philosopher from the 1930s, let's say, Martin Buber, subsequently the work of Dr. Terry Warner and the Arbinger Institute, where Jim operated for quite a number of years, and of course now in his own company, which is called Withy in the United States. And Jim has just written his latest book, which is a wonderful Christmas time. Can I encourage you to read this at Christmas time? If you've got something, if you're looking for something to really explore and get your teeth into, this is a brilliant read. It's also fundamentally a great description of how organisations both function and indeed on a daily basis fail to function. And not just the corporate world, the world of our community, the world of our families, and the world of human relation between people. It's a really powerful story, but there's a lot of learning in the story. And I do believe strongly this represents a new standard in organisational design for the 21st century. Now, here are some challenging thoughts. Jim proposes in You and We the laws of relation. And the first one is that everything we see is relation. You and I, the four of us sitting here, the people listening to this, everything that happens on a daily basis emerges out of relation. Everything is built by relation. And Jim uses a couple of very powerful metaphors. The classic that I love is the marriage, if you will, the coming together, the collision, the cohesion of oxygen and hydrogen in a particular relation that delivers life-giving water. Well done, Mike. I couldn't have asked you to have done that with better timing, my friend.
Perfect.
So this notion that two gaseous elements are transformed into a life-giving liquid called water is remarkable. Now, metaphorically, what does that look like in your organisation as you step into your change strategy, as you step into so-called transformation in your organisation? Is it genuinely transformation of that nature? Or is it something nothing, or is it little more than managed change, controlled change? Adaptation, sure. Is it transformation truly? Everything is built by relation. How we interact with each other is who we are. And then finally, we progress by uniting. Powerful laws of relation. And of course, this is taught in the book through the storyline, the interplay of the characters in the fiction. They learn these lessons. And there are others, the 5 levels of relation. Now, I'm raising these ones with you to stimulate our thinking. So this is established between human beings. Do we obstruct one another? Do we resist one another? When we come to a workplace, have you ever, Mike, Natalia, Radan, have you ever experienced resistance in an organisational setting? What about a family setting? Do we resist one another? Of course we do, Natalia. I mean, that is normal human behaviour. It's explainable. It's not very healthy. It's not particularly wonderful, and yet we do it. Why do we do this is a fair question. And there's lots to be said about that. We haven't got the time here today, but do we coexist? Do we add, if you want to use the simple arithmetic for want of a better term? Do we add? Is that the function by coming together? Do we add to one another's lives? Do we genuinely collaborate? Think about the word collaboration in the context of a cross-functional change delivery team, Radan. Do we truly multiply each other's efforts? Do we actually genuinely collaborate? And in that process, do we account for the impact we have in each other's lives throughout that siloed, functional, even cross-functional organisational initiative or strategy? The next one is compounding. Is there genuine compounding taking place in our relations? Are we genuinely integrating you and I, you and we, to use Jim's expression? Okay, so here's the challenging piece. I read this quite a few months back before it was published globally, and I said, Jim, this is outstanding. It's exceptional work. But here's the challenge. And the challenge is, where does artificial intelligence fit into this? That's the big question for me. Where does artificial intelligence, in all its forms and evolutionary futures, where does that fit in? Are we simply coexisting with AI? Because it feels like that at the moment. I feel as though maybe we're coexisting. For some people, they're choosing to resist it. In other cases, I've yet to see it, they're genuinely collaborating. I doubt we'll ever see the level of integration we're talking about here in terms of humans. I was just working with a group a few moments ago before we stepped into this discussion panel, this webinar, and we were talking about love in action in the social system. What does love in action look like in your family? What's the language of love in your enterprise? Now, take on board AI. What would that look like? How might that manifest at these two top levels of collaboration, integration, multiplication, compounding? Moving on. So we can actually measure the relational field across a human social system. We've yet to work out how to do that in respect of including AI. And yet that's an interesting proposition in itself. Let me move now to why we do what we do, whether we resist AI or we embrace it in one form or another. And I want to go to another wonderful group of teachers that I've had the privilege to work with for the last 25 years. And I'll call out Joseph Grenny and all of our good friends at Crucial Learning in, again, the US. And this book that was absolutely brilliantly released in 2008, I think, in its original edition, but it's in its third edition now, as you can see here, called Crucial Influence, previously known as Influencer, brought the very, very best that research and practice could bring from the social and the behavioural sciences together, and fundamentally presented us with a whole range of, and I'm just giving you a very, very quick view of this. Feel free to read the book, right? Either book. Great reading. And my practice over the last 15 years in this particular domain is deeply, deeply effective in organisations who are transitioning through change from a current state to future state for whatever the purposes. But these 6 sources of influence are why we do what we do, why we choose to resist or we choose to embrace each other, never mind that non-human aspect of our new lives called AI. So I'm going to do this really quickly. You can read the screen, but essentially we do what we do for 2 reasons, because we want to and we can. So the question is AI wanting to and able to do something? Gen AI versus agentic AI, we can ponder that, right? And that's what I'm going to let my learned friends here explore that a little bit further. Personal, social, and structural influences are interesting. Those 3 domains of influence in the pursuit of an important, one might question, mutually valued or aligned goal, result, outcome, or impact. So here's the distinction I want to make. It goes like this. These are the human elements of influence. I'm sure you can work that one out. It's not too hard. But here are the non-human ones. These are not human in nature. These are, number 5 is the economic influence of reward and penalty or punishment. Right? And source 6 in this model from our friends at, Joseph and his friends at Crucial Learning says, here are the structural enablers. So here's the proposition that I want to put before you, and I'm about to finish off on this. Where do you think AI fits? Well, in this particular body of knowledge practice, if you will, the underpinning data and science of the last 30, 40 years, AI is nothing more than a tool, an information-based tool that sits in source 6, a structural enabler. That's how it sits at this moment. So any ERP, CRM, any of these information systems are squarely one source of influence over our human behaviour, source 6. Is AI there, or at some point in the future, does it absolutely find its way somewhere else on this diagram? And I want to leave you with that challenging thought, the possibility, as I said at the outset, and I'm wondering, where you think, as you listen to this and about to listen to our friends here, where you think AI is, could be, should be, the possibilities for the future. All right. Well, with that said, I want to now hand over to my good friend here, Natalia Salzberg from Headway Group. Over to you, Natalia. Share with us your provocative thoughts.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for the intro. I'm Natalia. In my work at Headway, I look at how systems design and emerging technologies like Gen AI change the way people work. So that's the angle I'll be taking today. Most of us are now using tools like ChatGPT or Claude or many of the others to help with email, writing, preparing content, responding to routine customer inquiries, and even write code. But is this adoption actually making an impact to the bottom line? If you look at the research, that's not what it's showing. We're currently seeing that about 70 to 85% of AI initiatives are not translating to significant business value. 70 to 85%. You might assume that that means the technology isn't quite working. And that could be a fair assumption. But the research actually finds that it's more about how people work with the technology and how they work with each other while using the technology that's actually making a real difference. Can I have my first slide, please? So I'd like to talk about the changing shape of organizations. If you think about the traditional organizations, they look a little bit like a Christmas tree in the left. A broad base where most of the work is done, the process work, the routine tasks, and there's where you have typically larger teams. And as you go up the hierarchy, the number of people becomes smaller because the work becomes more complex. As we deploy these tools, they're able to do more and more of the repetitive tasks, and the shape of the organization starts to become thinner at the base. And what's interesting about that is that it shows that the nature of work is changing, not just the tools themselves. So how do we make sure that as the work changes, we can actually derive business value? How do we help the people in our organization solve the problems we need them to solve? When the work changes, the social system needs to adapt. Otherwise, people just end up scrambling. Who do they talk to? How decisions are made? Where judgment sits? All of that changes too. If you think about work in terms of problem complexity, it becomes a little bit clearer. Can I have the next slide, please? So this diagram shows how we measure problem complexity at Headway. On the left-hand side, you have the more everyday problems, the process work, the expertise work, the look it up and tell the customer work. Then as you move towards the right, the problems become more complex and the things that haven't been solved before, where you need ideas, ingenuity, context, judgment. That's what we're seeing. What we're seeing now is that AI can reliably take care of those first five, those routine and structured pieces of work, whereas as humans, we shine on the right-hand side. So earlier in the business show, Brad talked about a Formula One example, and where he talked about the 1.8-second pit stop, which was astounding. I'm sure he'll show you a little bit about that afterwards. The question then becomes, how do we help our organizations run that smoothly? How do we get our own version of that 1.8-second capability? And it's really about investing in our people. Not just the people who are AI curious, but the people who can actually use these tools to move the dial and then add the context and the judgments that the tools don't have. People who can look at what the system produces and actually understand what it means, see new ways through a problem, and effectively become the supervisors of that AI work. And that's what we need to invest in as businesses. We need to make sure that our people who can work at the more complex end of the spectrum, where judgment and context and creativity make all the difference. So if you're wondering where to start small. Look at where your people are spending their time today. Look at what they're doing. If you can find even just one repetitive task and reinvest that time into something higher value that requires the creativity, the judgment and context, you're already helping them move into the parts of the spectrum where the human capability translates into business value. And once people understand where they fit in the human plus AI world, that's when you start to see the returns. That's my contribution.
Beautiful. Thank you so much,
Brad.
Natalia. I've got a couple of challenging questions for you for later.
Oh, great. Looking forward to that.
Hang in there. Okay.
Will do.
Thank you very, very much. And let's move on to Radan. Thank you, my friend. What are your thoughts on this challenging world of AI?
Thank you, Brad, and thank you, Natalia. When I was thinking about how to prepare for my segment, I was thinking in a very similar vein as yourself. Being big proponent of benefit realization, I wanted to look into some of those statistics. So, Brad, if you can kindly bring that first slide. I leaned into famous McKinsey and Company, and going through the Seizing the Agentic AI Advantage report, I was quite flabbergasted by some of the data they have quoted. So almost all companies invest in AI, but only 1% believe that they are at maturity. And reinforcing what you said, there is what they call Gen AI paradox. Nearly 8 in 10 companies have deployed some Gen AI in some component way, shape, or form, but roughly the same percentage, 80%, report no material impact on earnings. Hence the slogan, Gen AI is everywhere, except in the company P&L, right? So that's quite stunning. Although having, similarly as Brad, having worked in the technology for last quarter of a century, I have seen similar kind of hypes with ERP and all new technologies. Lot of big promise, but then the practical implementation always struggles to achieve that promise, to really realize it. So at the heart of this Gen AI paradox seems to be the imbalance between the horizontal use cases, which is exactly as Natalie mentioned, simple co-pilots which are looking into how to generate meeting minutes, how to write, how to improve emails and communication, how to translate text, how to review, let's say, RFP for consistency and for answers. So they are relatively easy to deploy in the organization setup, but they are really difficult to measure the practical impact. If you click, it should highlight the kind of summary of that particular point. So yes, the horizontals are easy to roll out, but hard to measure. The real impact should be really coming from the more transformational verticals, right? So function-specific use cases. However, about 90% of them remain stuck in a pilot mode, which means that they are, again, not realizing that expected value and those benefits. So what to do about it? AI agents, and that goes back to Brad's point about moving from Gen AI to more complex Gen AI agents, which would help to address the Gen AI paradox. Those agents have potential to automate complex business processes, combining the autonomy and planning integration to shift the Gen AI purely from the reactive tool to be more proactive, goal-driven virtual collaborator. Now, I have stolen or taken Natalie's example of the lean Christmas tree. And I just thought, okay, so what happens when AI is actually added to the organization? So I thought that the analogy of different types of AI as different types of Christmas decorations would do it a service, right? But then, of course, it complicates the environment, the ecosystem. How do we manage this social organization, which consists both of human as well as non-human now, right? And it is not a theoretical exercise anymore. As of December 25, we have various examples in Australia, companies which to a certain degree implemented, rolled out Gen AI and agents. CBA being a good example. They are typically quite advanced in terms of deploying technology, and they have invested into the virtual advisors. They were hoping that they can save a lot of time by automating a lot of those easy situations, easy transactions. They were hoping they can reduce the number of volume number of calls or volume of calls coming to the help desk and so on and so forth. So they have deployed it. Then they have cut about 45 jobs because they believe that through the efficiency dividend, they could afford it, but they had to revert back. They had to rehire those 45 agents back because the technology simply wasn't yet as mature and it did not deliver on its promise. So that was quite an interesting set of news in the media. Right? So there are, of course, some other companies like Telstra and Woolworths and New South Wales Health and so on and so forth. And another example which kind of brought memories of the famous Robodebt is Services Australia. They already run about some 600 AI automated processes. But then I remembered, although Robodebt wasn't exactly AI, it was kind of relying on technology without putting in place sufficient controls, checking or having proper governance in place. And therefore, it ended up in the Royal Commission. It ended up class action where about $1.8 billion was reimbursed to the people who were impacted by the Robodebt situation. So those use cases or those examples, in my mind, highlight the challenges. Where was the control versus speed or human judgment in the Robodebt scheme example, right? So there are all sort of interesting challenges in this combined ecosystem. And going forward, I think that pretty much everybody agrees that as the picture tries to depict, AI should be involved in drafting, doing the research, doing the routine jobs, but the human judgment should be always in control. We should not release automated agents without any oversight, any control. If you can move to the next slide, this is what I thought as a conceptual construct, as a potential way how to address some of the challenges in dealing with those complex ecosystems of humans and non-humans and their collaboration together. So this agentic AI governance framework is meant to help with safe, ethical, and accountable use of the agentic AI in organizations. And at the moment, it's just kind of very initial draft. We are thinking of having our friend and colleague Ian Abrahams getting involved in that and making it more formal, more robust, and so on. But fundamentally, what I thought around those 8 building blocks or components, starting with the core principles for responsible agentic AI, there has to be human accountability. Every AI action should have a named human owner, right? Every activity must be under human control. There has to be transparency and traceability. There has to be log, there have to be audits so that we can go back and trying to understand what has happened, why did it happen, what was the reasoning, and so forth. So there are some other components. I will not go into the details because we don't have time, but there are things like safety by design, privacy and data protection underneath the principles for responsible agentic AI, things like GDPR and Privacy Act. If we move to the governance structure, that's where I envision things like AI steering committees, cross-functional governing bodies in place, which would represent IT, cyber, legal, compliance, operations, HR, finance, and so on, looking into those different use cases, trying to look into them and manage it as a holistic end-to-end process. Product ownership, another lesson learned from ERP times, if you will. All agentic AI systems should have system owner, risk owner, technical and process owner as such. There should be risk classification. So looking into those different applications of AI, which are low risk scenarios, meeting minutes, as opposed to high risk use cases, decisions which affect people, finances, compliance, or safety, right? Operational control, things like data minimization, security hardening, so that there is an authentication for all agents, so that no data is leaking out, and so on and so forth. Confidentiality, right? No data must be allowed to be leaked to external models unless explicitly authorized and encrypted, right? Things like that. Vendor and third-party oversight, because we have all plethora of companies providing different models and different technologies. Companies need to make a due diligence check for the model. How does it train? What is the security posture? What are the data residency guarantees, going back to the GDPR and Australian Privacy Act and so on? What are the contractual controls, right? So again, a whole lot of complexities when it comes to the vendors involved. Because it's a technology, there is a need for proper monitoring, testing, and lifecycle management. So again, things about before you deploy something into production, test for accuracy, bias, hallucinations. What are the task boundaries so that we do not have some unintended consequences? There has to be continuous monitoring, right? So that there are no unintended behaviors, cyber intrusions, and things like that. There has to be, as always, periodic review, control, annual, quarterly, or monthly, depending on the urgency and complexity, reassessing the risk, updating the controls, validating alignment with the corporate strategy, and so on. Employee training and culture. Basically, Brad has mentioned that, Natalia as well, and no doubt Michael will also touch base on the critical importance of the human factor in this framework. So what kind of training for all employees, for the specialists involved in some of those high-risk agent collaborations? The whole question of ethical culture, reinforcing that AI augments but not replaces human judgment, encouraging incident reporting, transparency, responsible use, things like that. And finally, incident response and escalations. There has to be a system in place understanding what might be the triggers causing alarm. If there is an output causing some legal or compliance risk, data breach, bias or discrimination, system failure, safety risk. If that happens, what do we do about it? What is the workflow to isolate the incident, analyze the root cause, and so on and so forth? So this kind of framework is one possible way how to help to address the Gen AI paradox, to move beyond the pilots, which were mentioned on the previous slide, and really try to implement and try to actually realize some value promised by the AI. And if I may just conclude with the last slide, which is trying to summarize. Okay, human should be involved in things like the creativity, like the judgment calls, the ethical, the relational, the contextual issues and ethics, while the AI remains in the reasoning, proposals, drafting, execution, because it brings a lot of operational excellence and improved productivity. Altogether, it brings a hybrid organization design. Again, going back to Brad's point about blending the silicon and carbon beings into one ecosystem. Yeah. So again, AI accelerates the execution, whilst the humans provide the judgment, the context, the values, empathy, meaning, negotiation. So that's where I would pause at the moment, and I would hand over to Michael so that you could chip in with your views.
Thanks very much, Radan. That was extremely helpful, mate. Really appreciate that. Mike, over to you, mate.
Fantastic. I approached this topic again through a good 25 years of experience, but for myself, maybe slightly different from some of my predecessors. I've spent a lot of time in digital programs under a range of functions during my career, and I've been very lucky to help design, strategize, deliver, and monitor digital solutions in situ with many different industries. So part of that is a significant responsibility at looking at the process that we engage in when we put digital and technology systems in place in organizations. And so I really can appreciate many aspects or many views, lenses, if you like, in regards to how we deliver capability, but also how we cope with change and how the organization flexes after experiencing that change for a certain amount of time. I'll get you to jump to the next slide there. So a lot of the insights here that I propose are really about understanding various practices within the delivery capability. What I broadly see there, whether it's at the extreme end of, a napkin sketch and concept creation, or it's right at the other end of downstream operations where systems have been in place. That system might be, for example, some process management within a large-scale bank, or it could be a workforce deployment tool that's used within a health scenario to help nurses and doctors be deployed around the organization. So I've worked in many of those different scaled situations, and I really find them all having unique and fascinating challenges. Certainly, the importance of human touch context is really critical. So in the Gen AI and AI era, and I don't think AI is just starting now. I've been working on AI deployments for probably about 10 years. What I've seen is a lot of safeguarding around AI and data science process, really in an isolated fashion in many organizations, particularly the larger organizations with larger technology budgets, have been able to progress AI in many different ways, both for algorithmic outcomes as well as increasing decisioning around business intelligence and getting benefits from that understanding of possible outcomes for different parts of, let's say, operations or profit and loss, product feasibility and the like. So within Gen AI, to the point that Radan really just made, we see and I guess everyone here has made, we see a significant early touch point with small processing and those horizontal features, those smaller capabilities to help you deliver, if you like, a roadmap, or be able to more effectively document program for transformation capabilities, to disseminate information in your programs, and be able to act as a personal assistant with some of the administrative business outcomes. Great in terms of automation, very personalized when it's one-on-one activity. There's typically quite a lot of data access for the LLMs that we're using in the scaled organizations that we work in, whether it's within a Microsoft platform or whether it's through GPT. It might be part of an Amazon environment. It could be part of Salesforce CRM tooling. So some of the problems with that happen at the personal level, with quality assurance needs, with the ability for individuals to continue to output at a higher rate, but still own the document and be wholeheartedly the one that can say, this document is the right outcome for the approach that I'm putting forward. When that comes to scaling, we see a whole step up of the organization, and the product considerations here and how we apply the product are really important. Applying the product, and this is something that I've really enjoyed during my career, applying a new product to roll out in an organization shouldn't just be about the shiny new technology features, if you like, the acceleration, the performance. It has to be about the human outcomes. It has to be about the effect on the individual. It has to be about how the individual takes responsibility for the product, and also how the organization sets up a network around the product to effectively deliver quality assurance and a reasonable working outcome for the people who are left on the ground using a product. So when that's a Gen AI product, that's something, again, that can happen on a one-to-one basis. But when it's a single agent working across several roles, well, suddenly you're talking about an agent delivering value that's going to engage with multiple individuals within the business, within the services, possibly even for a customer as an endpoint, and then also needs to be part of a quality oversight capability. And I loved the framework that Radan just put up. I think it's very in line with what I see good product management encouraging business and technology to do as they mature their products. I've certainly seen a great wealth of organizations push really quickly to get that first in market benefit and not always do the hard work on the backside of that so that downstream good product ownership is in place. I am literally working with clients who every day want to be first in market, want to have the delivery there, but don't necessarily have the product management skills or teams to really understand what it is to own these products and operate these products with responsibility. Responsibility not just for the quality of the product experience. It could be, let's say, a banking process through your banking app, but it also affects the internal staff. It may affect a range of different user types, let's say customer types that go across a range of demographics. It could also impact a range of downstream processes, flooding those processes with new applications, or sometimes in the case of, let's say, optimizations, removing some of those processes. And then we suddenly start to look at workforce redeployment. And of course, there needs to be that management function on the other end. So what I see in product management, while it is about technology, while it is about great design, is deeply, deeply required that we pay attention to the experience design at a range of levels. I've been quite lucky and done a lot with experience design during my time, but sometimes the organizations just lack the tools to engage at those multiple levels. Of course, what we're talking about here has a cost in terms of product design and implementation as well. So one of the things that AI is promising is quick rollout. And I think that that's really quite dangerous when it comes to varying performance with both Gen AI implementations, if you like, the large language model capabilities, but also when it comes to agentic networks, you're really multiplying the complexity of outcomes. So where an agent might be working with other agents, we really do need to monitor those benefits versus what are the performance issues along the way. So here's where I see more transparency required, better security oversight, understanding the risks so that your product management teams really know where they should be looking, looking at performance on a regular basis for those multiple systems. And my view overall here in terms of industry and how industry does, going across finance, health, mining and resources, government as well, is that when it comes to multiple dependent processes, most organizations are quite bad at product managing those processes and deeply looking at the performance of those processes. Because the analytics to understand those dependencies become quite complex. And I really feel that for most organizations, they love to buy an out-of-the-box solution where they've considered the risk up front and then they just want to operate it downstream because it's lower cost. But I don't think that's an option in the current environment with Gen AI or with the larger scale agentic sort of network development. So having multiple people in your organization who can truly say, I am part of a product management team that does agentic network management, I don't see anyone that can currently put hand on heart that claim to test in their environment. And I think that this is a space for us to grow into as the owners of agents. One of the things I'll jump into quickly there is that from an industry perspective, I do believe that our understanding of deep industry processes is really important here. It is a feedback loop for understanding the foundational components of the way that we apply agents in organizations. And I really feel that this is where we can look to understand efficiency and optimization. But at the same time, it still needs to be about understanding workforce disruption, understanding compliance and audit capabilities, and what is fairness in the workplace too, is something that is often very industry specific, perhaps even union specific in areas like education or health, certainly in mining and in many of those industries where there is a particular, if you like, sort of occupational health and safety consideration set that needs to be part of every process decision. Over here, when it comes to industry, industries should be able to sponsor good, responsible development by looking at reskilling, understanding those accountability frameworks like the ones that Radan put up earlier, and really understanding design as part of the way that they practice. And I'll definitely go out on a limb here and say there are many industries that don't do design well. And so I think here, this is like the digital era or the automation era, but it's on steroids. There's many different areas of improvement in product management process that help define the social outcomes for an organization. And they're great areas to grow into. So I think that there's a real opportunity here for organizations to be better with their leadership, to be directing if you like, growth in these different capabilities and core competencies, and look to sustainability into the future. So this is where change can really lean in. I think strategic change is going to flourish over the next 15 years as we start to look at engagement with these agentic sort of networks within our organizations. Helping them adopt and deliver is one part of it. But beyond that, the human considerations, the cultural shifts here will be huge. Working with robots on a daily basis is something that not that many of us do on scale. And I think that when it comes to suddenly working in organizations where you may have more robotic or agentic co-workers than you do actual human co-workers is an interesting proposition. It's something that we really have to step into from a leadership perspective. And I think that understanding the way in which your organization assesses risk, the way in which your organization understands what product management actually means, especially when it's good product management versus lean product management to deliver a prototype, that's really quite different. And so over here, I think we'll see the emergence of better sustainability models, better management frameworks and leadership hierarchy of documents and whole new ways of considering what a successful portfolio of digital and AI capability looks like. And so I think here also we need to open up the forum when it comes to leadership that is used to really staying isolated, like the data science of yesteryear, on the back of, let's say, data management capabilities and the huge budgets that have been allocated there. I think that we need to also make sure that there's a balanced approach. If you like, the reference to balanced scorecard here is a relevant one. We can really do more by leaning into all the dimensions of responsible and sustainable agentic network development. We're only just at the start of this story. And I think the organizational change piece here has many dimensions to explore. I'm looking forward to jumping in more deeply there with my colleagues over the next several years, really, to be very, very busy in this space. So I might stop there and throw back to Brad.
Fantastic, man. That's awesome. Hey, look, thank you very, very much to each and every one of you for sharing those insights, those perspectives, and to be honest with you, the provocations. I've done a fair few of these conversations over the last 2-3 years with a wide variety of groups and audiences, clients and communities. And to be honest with you, you're all bringing a very, very rich perspective to this really challenging future. To be honest, I'll say it this way, and I'm going to open the sort of conversation. So please think of your questions that you want to ask each other. But we struggle as human beings to deal with one another. We struggle with human beings to be in effective relation with one another. On the one hand, we can produce the most marvelous human relationships and families and communities and corporations and government agencies, the most amazing human action, the most amazing human thought, language, creativity, on the one hand. And then on the other hand, we can produce the complete opposite, the paradox, if you will, of human life. And we're now introducing a non-human form of intelligence to that society, to our world. And to the points that all of you have made, it is yet to be shown what that means. I agree with you, Mike. We're at the early stages, even though you and I and Radan and Natalia and many of our colleagues at the ACMP and elsewhere, we've been involved in these technologies since, can I just say, last century? I love saying last century.
Yeah.
And we have, I don't want to remind myself of what I started coding in back in the mid-70s, but the simple truth is that kind of algorithmic thinking, tasking, action, and all that it produced for us. I think I said to Radan the other day, it was a Zilog Z80 assembly language program that I wrote with my father-in-law to try and predict or to randomly generate numbers for lotto or something or other back in the 70s. So it's pretty pedestrian when you think about what we're doing today. And we had a lot of fun, we mucked around together. Today, it has much, much deeper and far-ranging consequences when we bring these non-human systems online, and I say metaphorically, to life in our organisations, to the very strong points you've all made today. So, interesting times, and thank you again for all that you have shared today. I'm going to suspend our show here, our slides. Let's put that to one side for a moment, and let's just talk with each other. So what I'd love to do is just hear a few questions or pose a few questions and see where it takes us. So I'm going to start with all of you, but it really was Natalia. Okay, so Natalia, we've got this complexity a scale that you presented to us. And
I love
we've
that
all
one.
It's a great way of positioning this, isn't it? And we've all spoken to it. And I said to my colleagues only last week in Canberra at the Australian National University, I was at the National Leadership Summit for 2025. And it was really interesting because one of the biggest challenges we face as human beings, as a species, is this exponentially increasing complexity in our lives. The system of life is becoming increasingly complex. And now what we're contemplating, no, we've gone past contemplation. Now what we're doing is we're introducing this multifaceted, multi-layered, kind of unknown, without the guardrails that you were referring to, Radan. We haven't got these governance frameworks just standardized, consistent, and being applied across life. We're relying upon the governance of each and every institution, organisation, small and large scale, to have their own, to do their own thing, so to speak. And so this is bringing another layer, another facet to that complexity. So the leaders that I was working with were a range of scholars and academics from around the world, and here in Australia and across the ditch in New Zealand with our friends over there, but also practitioners, characters like me and many, many others who are working with organisational clients on a daily, weekly basis and wrestling with this evolutionary path that we've got ourselves on. This complexity is in the view of this group at this summit, it's the number one issue facing leaders in the near future. And there is a specific skill that we identified. And the skill's called sense making. And I'm going to add another one, which is called question making. So if we're curious enough about the issues that we've all raised here today, are we able, do we naturally practice it on a daily basis? Do we practice making questions to address what we're observing, what we're sensing, those feedback loops you were referring to, that measurement, that impact assessment, the risk, etc. Are we capable of asking the questions in complex environments, socio-technical systems? Can we do that? And do we do it well? And do we pass that skill around? Do we develop that skill in all of our people? But secondly, in that context, are we doing the sense making? Are we making sense of this? To the point that just about every one of you made. Here's my question, if I may, with that little introduction. And any one of you can respond to this. I don't think we've got answers today, have we, friends? But we're asking some interesting questions. So, Natalia, and others, that scale, you know those first 4 or 5 on the left-hand side of your scale, Natalia? I'll see if I can find it again. But this is a really, really significant aspect of our life. Can we do something meaningful with all this wonderful time, this availability that is created because agentic AI in particular is freeing us from the burden of that bulky tree, the bottom of the Christmas tree, the less complex tasks and activities that normally a vast array of human beings would address. What are your thoughts on that?
If you think about people who are on the left-hand side of that spectrum, they are used to the world being very clear. There's rules, there's processes, everything is as it should be. There's an authority that tells you what should be right, and then you follow it. And as the world changes around you, and if things become more and more complex, people who are not able to sit in ambiguity to make decisions will struggle. And it's a journey to get from being told what to do to being able to take in the imperfect information around you, that the fact that there may not be answers, that you may need to take a punt and make a decision that may affect many other people. That's not something that somebody just turns from one day to another. Something that requires a development journey. And so this is what I was saying earlier in my talk, and where it's incumbent on us as leaders and organizations to actually shepherd those people that are used to following rules, helping them to exist in a world that is way more complex, that there is no answers, and where their humanity can solve problems, that they haven't been used to using those skills. And this is something that can be developed. It's not something that you're born with one way or the other. It's just it's something that can be taught, and you learn through experience, and you learn through mentoring, and you learn through professional development. So I think that there's an opportunity for organizations to move people towards that, and it's around and teaching them that ambiguity is not a bad thing. It's not the enemy. And as things become more complex, it's about how to navigate that that complexity well, how to become comfortable with not knowing.
Beautifully said. Now, can I just provoke a little further? And I'd love to hear from Radana and Mike as well. Let's take the human being out of what you just said, Natalia, and place an agentic AI, a non-human being, into that description. Will they tolerate ambiguity? Can they make sense of confusion, awkwardness? Can they make sense of us as human beings that bring some uniqueness to, quote unquote, a relation with AI? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts?
Please. And then our other two learned gentlemen.
So this is, I guess, I'm sure you all noticed that when AI doesn't know something, it invents it.
Yep.
And it has such confidence in that it's correct.
And
that's what we call hallucination. right?
That's it.
And so AI, as it is today, and it may develop over time, really fits in with what's probabilities, what's more likely, and that is all based on what existed in the past. So all that training that it received is all about, probability of something being the next right thing, rather than using that judgment, context, and experience that human beings have. So to actually get AI systems from procedurally and probabilistic to more like the human side of things, it's going to take, a completely different way, a different kind of AI, I think. And I think that we can do that. But we're not there yet. We're still battling with AI wanting to please, AI wanting to give us an answer when there isn't one, as opposed to giving options.
So that sounds like the parent-child kind of relation, is it?
Yeah, a little bit.
So it's oh, and by the way, it's a messy world that we live in. It's a messy world we're creating. That complexity represents, can I use that expression, a mess. So the challenge is not just making sense of complexity, this deep interconnectedness, and this deep flow and impact, but it's also making sense of the mess that we have authored, we have created. And we don't want to get near super intelligence where it creates its own mess that we're dealing with, right?
Yeah. And
so
I think that I was going to say, I think that we should resist the temptation to shoot from the hip, because
of course,
as people, when we see complexity, the first thing that we reach towards is a simple solution. And sometimes that actually makes things worse. So we need to learn. We need to learn about what it is that we're trying to achieve, and think about it, not react.
Great.
Yeah,
that's great. Sage advice. Radan, Mike, your thoughts?
I'll just quickly chip in before Mike, you could wrap it up. I agree with what you said, Natalia, completely, both the hallucinations and your last point, which is why I quite like in Grok when you ask it and it provides an answer, and then below that it shows try harder. Right, and that goes into a deeper level of argument, providing further information. And I think it's very, very important and very crucial, because your point about hallucination is one but sadly, after the tragic events at Bondi, there is already a lot of misinformation, which is basically posted online, showing that one of the terror, not suspects, he actually did it, right? But that he has met with some Indian official in Manila, and immediately it creates some kind of conspiracy theory. So how do we, again, what kind of governance, what kind of controls we put in place to prevent these things happening, both at the society level as well as within the corporations? Mike, over to you.
Look, I think I love where this conversation is, because I think what it raises is some key flaws in human capability across the spectrum of human capability. And flaws is perhaps not the right term, but the reason that we have a spectrum of capability in our workforce, from very procedural, if you like, day-to-day repetitive tasks, all the way through to super architectural, sociological considerations and large-scale sort of, company and systems planning. That is a huge spectrum, and the spectrum of human capability there is represented from top to bottom. We also need to consider not just workforce sort of redeployment, but also what it means to work with agentic capabilities or AI capabilities at that range as well. So understanding the sociological impacts versus monitoring a process could be really quite different. And I certainly think that one thing that AI is challenging us to do at a really basic level, if you want to get a good response from a large language model, you should be looking at not just giving it a single line prompt, but also informing the approach and informing the way that it quality assures the outcome. And that is strategic thinking 101. A lot of people don't practice that on a day-to-day basis. A lot of people want to go to the shop, order a sandwich, get the sandwich and eat it. And that's their complex process for the day. So
yeah,
I think that we've got some recognition around sort of the frailty of the human disposition and where it's winning and where it's not winning. And I think that at some point, organizations need to take some responsibility there. They need to find solutions that encourage and retrain workforces to lift that level of, let's say, deeply sort of integrated capability within the way that their workforce approaches problem solving. I think we need to revisit the scientific method a lot over the next 20 years to make sure that people bring more of that approach from hypothesis through to a tested outcome to their day-to-day work-life experience. And look, that's really exciting. It's exciting for all of us because we're going to be very, very busy.
yes.
But hopefully we're also going to see a lot of great problems to solve. Perhaps we're also going to see a lot of examples of bad implementations along the way, which I think we need to start collecting because there will certainly be more and more of these examples, particularly in, let's say, marketing and media. I think we need some really strong legislative guidance and change over the next 5 years because it's very hard to trust what we're seeing now with the quality of some of the video outputs from the video and the language models these days. It's already mind-boggling, and we're industry leaders and industry professionals, so it is really exciting. I did have a question for Natalia.
Please.
On when you present that complexity model to organizations, what's the leadership response like for that? And is this a model that individuals in the organization are ready to engage with, or is this the starting point before engagement models?
So with organizations, we actually basically focus on the individuals, and we use this spectrum as a measurement system to actually understand where the individual is sitting. And the goal is to move the individual up the higher up the spectrum. And in order to do that, it's a journey, right? It's about it's about this is what you're doing today. This is what the next step looks like. This is why it's hard, and sort of coach them through. And we're using technology to help with that. Making sure people are coached through the process to ideally move beyond the left hand side from the left hand side towards the right hand side. So that's what we see. It needs to be at the individual level. And actually, when we have a target, we're here, we want to get here, and this is how we get there.
Yeah, so I've seen similar frameworks attempted in, let's say, training platform personalization, where you've got a range of, let's say, complexity in the industry. When someone starts out, they're understanding maybe at the process level, and as they move through, they understand more of the nuances about the interdependencies and complexities of the systems. It certainly goes really well with a systems thinking approach as well, where it kind of creates a strong linkage between system integrity as well as human sort of the frailty of human understanding. So I really like it.
And it's really important to recognize that the language we use at each of these steps, each of these levels, is drastically different. So there's this concept of mimetic language. And so the language that we use to actually get someone to think from this way to that way is all about how we transition that language. Because you actually find, if you talk to people that are in the procedural space, they have particular views, particular ways of using language. And as they progress, that actually starts to change as well. And so it's really about developing that capability along the spectrum.
Wow, beautiful.
Now,
Radan, question.
Brett, I wanted to ask you, can you please bring up that slide you showed with the crucial learning, and you had the six matrix. And you have posed the question, okay, so AI is in 6. I think based on the conversation we just had, we agree that definitely AI is already in the segment 3, peer influence, whether it's good or bad, but it is in there, right? I would be interested to tap into Mike's experience. Where do you think, in which other segments do you see AI recently, and let's say in next few years?
Look, certainly within product management tooling and capability, there is a real step up. Most of the platforms that I use as part of what are, early design, discovery capability through your define phase into development, the whole life cycle has been affected by AI tooling. And so that's really quite interesting, because from a product perspective, we should be considering all 6 of these. So you could lightly say AI may already exist in all 6, but certainly I think 3 and 4, absolutely. You're going to nefariously get others helping you, but also providing you with AI-derived templates along the way. So that's already happening with colleagues and in team meetings and product meetings that I'm in. I certainly also see it as part of client engagement as a vendor. And really, when it comes to looking at discovery and understanding the art of, the possible, if you like, the hypothetical, I'm already leaning heavily into probably more of the processes around creating mood boards of, various sort of concepts of importance when it comes to product management. It may be that I'm using AI to help me generate a range of content that I can then more effectively communicate with. I'm certainly at the moment using AI to help me generate several formats of what I see is a very basic sort of spreadsheet worksheet solution. However, the client doesn't necessarily like that format, but isn't really able to articulate the format that they would like. So I'm producing another 5 versions of that for them, so that they can find the one that they're most akin to, and then we'll iterate and move forward from there. So look, I think it's arguable that it may already exist in all 6, but I do think there's depth to some of these systems and the intent that Brad was putting forward here. For example, in extrinsic reward, I think it really depends on the type of engagement systems that the organization might use. If that was to be viewed as a loyalty system, for example, there are definitely AI-based loyalty systems out there, so getting sold for a lot of money. So
thank you. It's a very, very good question and a great response. Thank you both. I will say to you right now that there are my colleagues who are social psychologists, social scientists, behavioral scientists, neuroscientists would say it is categorically, without equivocation, and only to be found in 6. So I take your point, and that's the whole idea. I wanted to present it to challenge us to see what we might think about this. And the reason I make that distinction between the human and the non-human, if you will, the carbon versus the silicon, is because the silicon is what appears in 5 and 6. It's the world of the objectively, factually, non-biological entities, if you want to put it that way, right? So we're not talking about it being in 3, 4, 1, 4, or 1, 2, 3, and 4. It being AI can only, by the nature of this science, this has really been at the best we've produced in the social psychologies and the organizational behavioral science for the last 30, 40 years. It can only ever really appear and reside in that source 6. Now, having said that, it has an influence and impact on all the others. So how are you impacted from a personal motivation perspective by the tools around you, by the agents around you? Does it lend to your abilities, your capacity to respond in some of the moments we talked about, Natalia?
It's also whether it's actually can be viewed as a tool, or is it much more than a tool?
Yeah.
So we are seeing AI companions now. So
which brings us back to this.
Yes.
Right? So I
Which is the
think the
reason
companion is much more than a tool. You know,
yeah.
people rely on it for relationship, for their emotional lives.
Mm.
Yes, we are using it as tools, of course, but I think we're also using it far beyond that.
Absolutely.
I have to jump on the back of that and just throw something bombastic into the conversation. I did see the week before last that a Japanese lady had married her AI companion.
Yep.
I don't know
Yep.
if you saw that. That was
Yep.
that's a milestone, right? So
Yeah, it's like that
Yep.
1.8 second pit stop, my friend. You know, it's a world first. Well, maybe that wasn't the first, but you know, these things are occurring around us. Radan.
Yeah, can you bring back that matrix, please? Because I wanted to comment following on Mike's example about the extrinsic motivation. One thing which a little bit scares me is the kind of intrinsic motivation of the silicon, so to speak. And if I just extrapolate the social media and the fact that a lot of those algorithms are there to increase engagement. It is not about sharing the truth, having positive our society, improving motivation, but purely engagement. And I had very personal experience when our daughter suffered from anorexia. And I was shocked when I learned that there are websites and social media groups which are promoting how to do eating disorder properly. They were really promoting these kind of horrible behaviors. So how do we fight that? Those kind of nefarious motivations, which sometimes are open, sometimes hidden. How do we handle that? That is something which sort of scares me.
I hear you, mate. And you know, if you think about it this way for 2 seconds, these 6 sources of influence are referencing the social sciences, the human sciences, the human relations. Now, if I can offer you this possibility, so there's one dimension. Let's add another dimension. The same 6 sources of influence could occur in the non-human entities. So we were talking about agentic networks, Mike, right? So here is 6 sources of influence for these new intelligences, these networks of agentic, these agentic AI, and then we've got this human, social, the human dimension, and the 6 sources of influence are working. So you mentioned the point. What about what's motivating the individual agent? Is it possible for that agent to form a degree of desire? When we start talking about having a relationship with a human being as their partner, for example.
It's very interesting that there's also been some very negative cases of human impact there as well. And I think it comes back to Natalia's point earlier, and Radan likely made the same point, that we are seeing behavior from the LLMs and from early agents, which is really about, with strong confidence, delivering what it considers to be high propensity information, right, or high probability information in terms of what you would like to see. And so that's essentially the basis of sweet talking us, right? So
sweet talking us, Mike.
Yeah,
that's right.
What a terrible thought, my friend.
I know.
Let me just we'll start to wrap this up if I may. And I'm immediately, as we embarked on this conversation this afternoon, I was immediately thinking of one of our good friends, Dr. Aidan Thornton, who is a complexity scientist and now with Swinburne University, a complexity scientist, and he is also an epistemologist. So an epistemologist looks at the meaning behind these conditions, these circumstances, these world views. And I think to myself, so when we look at any one of these dimensions and we share our different provocations and ask our questions of each other, what meaning do we draw from that? What meaning does this have for us? And what new meaning might be created, not by just the humans in our lives, right? The non-humans in our lives, the AI agents, these networks that we were referring to earlier on. How do we draw this meaning out? And what do we do with it when we've got it? Now, I don't expect us to answer that question. I don't have an answer. I have a few thoughts, and maybe we can use that as a foundation for inviting a few of our other colleagues to join us in our next conversation next year in 2026. So this notion of where does meaning come from, where does truth come from, is deeply problematic for us as a human species. And now, as I said, we're about to we're in the midst of this journey, this evolution, with another class of intelligence sitting on top of the existing 6 sources that influence why we do what we do, how we say what we say, what truth and meaning we draw from that life experience. And I'm curious about what an AI agent might do before we head towards what we're talking about of super intelligence. It's another game altogether. Natalia, you had a question for Radan.
It's a bit of a challenge question. So Radan, you you brought up this framework with all the things around, control and safety and governance. And look, and as I read each of the, I don't know if you want to bring it up, as I read all the elements, makes, I wonder if you can answer the question, how is this any different from outsourcing operations? What are they, in terms of accountability that an organization has to their customers and to them, to other various stakeholders, how each of these, which one of these, are AI only type considerations? Because when we decide to outsource operations, we can outsource tasks and jobs, but we can't outsource accountability. So,
yeah,
very glad to hear your thoughts on this.
Very interesting question. And incidentally, during the last webinar, as Brad said, Max Teixeira was presenting his view, and I have posed a question. So, if we extrapolate the agentic AI to the future, it is a big existential threat to the big outsourcers like Wipro, TCS, HCL, and all of those Indian companies which carved themselves out for 30 years or so. Now there is a potential to have it done even cheaper with the agentic AI. I guess question is always with the quality. I have been working in IBM as well as Wipro, so I have been exposed to outsourcing deals, to your point. And whilst there is always this big notion of, yes, we can do things cheaper because of the cost differential between India or Philippines versus Australia and so on, but I have seen over and over and over again the big quality challenges which compromise that stated objective of having it done cheaper. And I think it's a balancing act. To what degree do you want to lean towards left or right? But as a corporate, I would probably lean more towards having more quality rather than having the work done by some bottom feeder organization which does it cheaply, but then you have to rework it over and over again, and you have additional costs related to that. So if I go back to your question, I think that, yes, fundamentally, there is nothing revolutionary or nothing dramatic. What I was trying to say, without going into too much details, is that all of those should be, I guess, extrapolated further and fine-tuned when it comes to to the AI. Those things even Mike has mentioned, like the operational controls, the human in the loop, right, as one of the key elements in there. The guardrails, that the agentic systems must have task boundaries, some execution limits in terms of time and scope and permissions and safe fail modes. There should be no self-modification capability for the agentic AI, right? We have to prevent unauthorized development doing changes on its own. And then when we go back to the other controls I have mentioned, there has to be audit trail. There has to be traceability in terms of the reasoning why the recommendation was made in such and such way, and is it repeatable? Right, going back to my experience with outsourcing and some of the organization providing that, yes, they could do it cheaply by the virtue of throwing 100 smart people on a problem and somehow applying jugaad, they did it. but it is not a repeatable process which could be deployed on a regular basis, right? So I don't know if it answers your question. What I try to do is really fine-tune it with some AI-specific points, which I didn't have time to go through. But as we said, we would like to continue with Ian Abrahams, who is our specialist in the risk area, and we would like to fine-tune it and develop in more detail so that potentially it could be used either in the engagement Mike is doing or in any other way.
Fantastic. Thank you for that.
Thank
That's
you.
great, mate. There's a really interesting element here. I'm just going to pop this on the screen because you just raised a very valid point, both Natalia in your question, but also your response, Radan. Gen AI is everywhere except in the P&L. Well, you know what? The other thing that I've discovered over the last 25, 30 years is a lot of things that aren't in the P&L or the balance sheet. And let me put it this way. You'll never find in the P&L, and I've had this conversation with CFOs, I've had it with boards, I've had it with chartered accountants and financiers all over the planet. There is absolutely and categorically nothing in the P&L that records and reports the cost of human behaviour. There's nothing in the balance sheet that records and reports the value of human behaviour. Ergo, where in the profit and loss statement, the balance sheet, will we actually look at the cost of agentic behaviour, or on the balance sheet, the value inherent in agentic behaviour? We haven't got it yet. So the P&L and the balance sheet are, well, I use the language flawed, F-L-A-W, but let's just move beyond that language and simply say they're inaccurate and incomplete records of our activity.
I totally agree with that. So cultural debt, technical debt, not
you got it, man.
in the balance sheet.
Yep.
Talking the same
Program
language.
debt not represented in the balance sheet. Knowledge management debt not represented in the balance sheet. So there's
Mike,
many things we could include there.
Yeah, those
Mike,
things
can I
have
say
risk,
what?
right? So risk is
Oh,
not
exactly. Yeah,
right. So
exactly
they're not in the
right.
balance sheet either. So
No.
I don't think the balance sheet is for that purpose.
The best way.
So
I agree.
that's the problem, though.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's the problem, of course, is that it's not seen for that purpose, and yet it attempts to ascribe value to the enterprise or the element of enterprise, or a cost and value. It's interesting. It's a challenging piece.
It's worth drawing a definition there between management accounting and fiscal, if you like, taxation-driven accounting, because it should be within management accountability. But many organizations struggle with accommodating cultural and human factors both into the ones that we've just described and more into their management accounting. And I think the best that we see in the APAC region is organizations that are pushing the limits of agility and agile accounting capability. But often that doesn't stem all the way back up to portfolio. Not in a meaningful manner anyway. And there's very few organizations, I think, in this region that actually practice portfolio level Kanban, where they can really look at a hypothetical set of scenarios for year-on-year delivery and understand all of those accountabilities at that level. I think most of the time there's a bit of a glass ceiling within organizations to stop those human factor insights trickling up too far into the executive.
So for all of those frailties, Mike, for all of that, what's the implication for agentic AI? How does that get integrated into our thinking and to our practices that are of a financial nature? Or is everything in, you think about how we often do this. We say, you know what, Mike, you've got this $2 million or $57 billion. Let's take it off budget. Let's take it out of these books of account and place it over here. We don't have to scrutinise, inspect, or worry ourselves about it. It's separated from the integrated statements of account for this entity.
I think that a big problem is that there is no consistent, cross-company measurement system for these things. So, unless there's some, much like a P&L is a very standardized thing. Balance sheet, very standardized. There's certain measurements that actually go into that. We don't have a globally agreed measurement system for the things that you're talking about, which is why each company is going to do their own thing.
Yeah.
So what's our standard then for measuring the impact of AI? What do you think?
I don't know.
I quite like Mike's slide, which was talking about balanced scorecard. I must admit, I am rather disappointed that the balanced scorecard, it emerged, then it was, all the hype for say 10 years, and then it dissipated into the ether, and I don't hear about it anymore.
Yeah,
I agree. I think it's disappointing to see that it hasn't become a more critical component of, let's say, hierarchy of documents at the highest level in organizations, because understanding those accountabilities under a balanced scorecard should impart the right knowledge to the executive and steering in the organization. But it has, I think, been seen as something that was very difficult to do in organizations as well.
Complex, Mike?
Yes. Well, certainly, I think understanding value versus debt with some of these, let's say, more esoteric dimensions of enterprise functionality, whether it's cultural development, knowledge debt, there are many sort of ambiguities around determining those audit trails. And there's often huge variation when you look at product accountabilities across the organization. So the way that one particular part of the organization is running an agile program compared to another could be completely different, despite the fact that they're keeping to the agile safe framework. And so we see those type of variations being a challenge from on the ground to sort of audit level understanding. And I think that's when it comes back to the executive and steering and strategic capabilities in organizations saying, well, how much is too much for us? How much can we afford to do? And it could also be that data siloing has become significant as a challenge with those type of endeavors as well. So, having a single system of measurement which accounts for all variations is really difficult.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Exactly. Good luck. And we have discussed with Brett the other day. I think that the recent re-emergence of shareholder capitalism, which focuses purely on increasing shareholder value without considering, the other stakeholder audiences like the community, employees, etc., that is not very supportive of what we are discussing here. So that's, I guess, another challenge.
So the world of cybernetics and epistemology awaits us, my friends. So thank you very, very much. We'll dig into that another day with each other and a few other friends as well. So folks, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you. It's been an absolute privilege and a pleasure to have this chat this afternoon. And I wish you all a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see you in 2026. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Mike. And thank you, Redan.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Brett, for facilitating. Have a good day, everyone.
Total
Have a great
pleasure.
day.
Thank you.
Wonderful session.